Boom! Yeah, something like that. Hey, I'm Thundercloud here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Just Ashley and I tonight, washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rains. It's Wednesday Words, and we're going to have a few linguistic games. Well, yeah, tonight we'll begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we broadcast. Camilla Ryan, the bandbike, to acknowledge sovereignty's never been ceded. Now, one of our regulars, Gladys Wilson, called me today and said, "James, I'm not coming in. My brother's passed away." So I'd just like to take this opportunity to send my condolences to Gladys Wilson and all of her family. And this is the epitaph that I wrote for her brother Cecil this afternoon. He has left the tablelands, which has always been his home. His life has been grand. No longer will he roam. No more walking in the mountains. Magpies waking him at dawn. Fresh air and the sunshine on a cold and frosty morn. He walked by creeks and gullies, sat beneath tall trees. Freedom all around him, cares blew away in breeze. The smell of flowers in the spring, kookaburras laugh with glee. Of your life we praise and sing, now your soul flies free. The noise of life lies far behind. The smell of fresh shorn fleece. Dark clouds clear and the sun shines. Your life grand, Cecil, rest in peace. So that's for Gladys Wilson and her family in memory of her brother. All right, what else have I been up to? Well, what you can do right now, before anything else, you can hit the thumbs up button. Go on, do it please. Thank you. Because that means that then this gets better metrics on YouTube and it goes out to more people. Also down in the comments below, in the description, you'll see the PayPal donation link at Australian Poetry Hall, all one word. So if you want to donate to the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame and what I'm doing here to celebrate and preserve our wonderful cultural legacy and also promote poetry and give new poets the opportunity to grow and perform, etc., then in the description below, PayPal. Thank you very much for your donation in advance. All right, last night on Chill and Tuesday I was reading out Henry Lawson, and I'm going to repeat one of the ones that I did last night because I thought it was quite relevant. You see, this was written in 1892, just after the people had proposed a one-man, one-vote law in Australia, because there was like a House of Lords which was based on how much land you had, and if you had more land then you got more votes. Funny that, isn't it? Well, this was before women could even vote, so it wasn't until 1902 that women got equal votes. Well, anyway, he's talking about the House of Fossils here. The House of Fossils. Behold, above the people an old museum stands, the ancient House of Fossils, which is mighty in the lands. And there, as in the days gone by when ancient rulers lied, invulnerable ignorance and cheek are petrified. And though the god of property might grit his teeth and frown, I think it's time the people pulled the old museum down. I think that we've been fooled enough by venerable lies. I think that It's time the workmen wipe the verdure from their eyes. Why send our men to Parliament? There's nothing to be won. For all the good they do is by the fossilised undone. We start the car of progress and we see it coming back, for lo, the old museum stands forever in the track. We cannot pass the measures that the people talk about, and there'll be no reform until we clear the fossils out. We battled for one man, one vote. The people passed the bill. But listen now, the fossilised can thwart the people's will. The now Pilcher first denied in terms sarcastically choice that Labor members represent the working people's voice. He went a little further and he spiked their guns to wit. He did deny their rights to say they represented it. He drew his sword of argument from out its rusty sheath and dared the champions who threw the assembly in his teeth. And he denied the truth to all intents and purposes. I want to know what Pilcher represents. Then Coombs must add his dribble to the everlasting flood. He hoped that they would stop the bill and nip it in the bud. But the plant shall bud again, and time, the grand old thief, shall nip the house of fossils in the sere and yellow leaf. A fossil, he, and so, of course, he thinks that it is best that any man should vote where'er he has an interest. He gave a case in point, he said, in other days, lang syne. He went into the wilderness and opened up a mine. The place is populated now by thousands, mostly fools, and he even gave the number of the children in the schools. And if the bill was passed, well then, what then? Well, anyhow, he couldn't represent or help the boss to boss the district now. I really think that man who craves so much for place and pelf should go and dig a hole and undertake himself. Then Ironmonger Mackintosh addressed the fossilised. He claimed the rights of property. They should be recognised. He lives like other rocks as though the past has never been. He really cannot say he has since last election seen a single public meeting called on purpose to discuss the question of one man, one vote, but it was ever thus. For if the whole creation left the reign of wrong behind, the fossils wouldn't see, for the petrified are blind. And in his inconsistency, he thinks it is too much that he be asked to give a vote to parasites as such. Alas for human arguments, when these enlightened men deny the starving thief a vote, while wealthy thieves have 10. If honest labour can't outvote the spieler and the tout, 'tis time the Lord got up in wrath and wiped the nations out. Then Joseph rose to caution the community at large. I really think the God of greed was left in Israel's charge. He did not hesitate to say that if the bill was passed, we'd turn and put a cruel tax on property at last. He looked into the future just as far as he could see and drew a painful picture of poor, helpless property. He mouthed about frugality and said, as bold as brass, that which injures capital will damn the working class. He dribbled and he cautioned, and we do not say he lied. He cautioned mankind just as much as Pilcher had denied. Then purblind lawyer Pigott rose with something in his throat. He said the bill was never meant to give one man, one vote. The gist of Pigott's argument was that the bill was meant to make a pauper equal to an honourable gent. And then, upon the bill, there fell another of the rocks, with 30,000 acres of the people's land was Cox. He said, etc. But why repeat the senseless bosh again? As Antony remarked, they are all honourable men. And still, above the people, the house of fossils stands the greatest of phenomena in these enlightened lands, and there as in the grand old days when Roman fossils lie, invulnerable ignorance and cheek are petrified, and though it shelters property and helps to prop the crown, I think it's time the toilers pulled the old museum down. I think that we've been fooled enough by venerable lies. I think it's time the people cleanse the verdure from their eyes.
Who wrote that?
That was Henry Lawson, The House of Fossils, written in 1892, and it's about the vote for one man vote, one vote, because there was like a House of Lords based on land ownership back then. Actually, people put it up. There's a bit more, another one, the follow-up is the more echoes from the old museum, and then a bit over the thing, another one called Modern Parasites, and it's all about the same thing at the same time. And it's quite interesting that, you know, it's time we pulled the old museum down, because like in 2023, there's a great argument for the reform of our dysfunctional democratic system that is really outdated and only serves the interests of the oligarchs. I'd even like to propose making parties illegal. Imagine that, hey? Just no parties, no party politics, and you know, direct democracy where people could propose votes, because Australians are pretty much the most politically educated people in the world, because we've had to have been, because we do have referenda. Yeah, that's actually a fact compared to most other places. All right, so now I've got a few more. So welcome. We've got a few watchers tonight. Are you here to watch or to do poetry, or?
I'm here to recite.
Oh, excellent. What's your name?
Pater Mace.
Welcome, Peter. Where do you come from?
Central Coast.
Excellent. Oh, what brings you up here?
Trout.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, well, I got a few little ones that I'll do before I move on. No, actually, I might just do this one particular one. It's about statism. It comes with a bit of a long, blurred introduction. Government's a religion known as statism. Is statism a religion? Statism is the faith-based religious belief that there is a magic entity called government that has superhuman powers and rights that normal humans don't have. A statist believes in a plethora of magic rituals, ceremonies and parades, such as the common practice of mob rule through the process of voting for pre-selected subjects in a popularity contest to wield a monopoly on violence and perpetual theft from its subjects, and become the clergy and the high priests of the death cult of state theism, whose track record of democide far outnumbers the death toll of all other religions in human history combined. That's an interesting fact, isn't it? The religion of government is responsible for more deaths than all other religions.
Who wrote that? You wrote that.
That's a fact, actually. Yeah, I continue. For the state to exist, there are more than two individuals, therefore more than one definition of authority over the other. Therefore a belief, religion, because religion is a belief, it's not a fact, one is morally superior. The characteristics of statism doesn't have any particular ideology because its only goal is to be the leading player in every sector, economic and social, by increasing its influence over the people. Sounds pretty true so far. In statism, even though the state tries to increase its influence, but it does not try to be an authoritative state. States believing in statism try to portray themselves as socialist to the poor and capitalist to the business fraternity on paper. But in reality, it doesn't really adhere to any of these ideologies. Statism vehemently practices state capitalism, though it claims to do it to uplift the downtrodden in society. Now for the poem. Religion is not about a human being spiritual, but it's about a spiritual being human. They went to church and were hurt by the judgment of the humans at church, all with a different perspective of seeing, hearing, feeling, and spiritual being. Be this, be that. Wear special clothes and a special hat. Praise dog, praise cat, praise this and praise that. Praise Mary, John, Ben, and also they, them. Bar, bitch, you ate, Ken, Valium again. Praise fish, lamb, geeses, lions and Jesus. Governments police us with taxes, bleed us. But do you want to know the schism? Government is a religion known as statism. That's it. You ever heard of Elf on a Shelf? Elf on a Shelf was a book written in 2007. It's about an elf who went, it's a kind of moral story. But anyway, in the AI community, generative AI, people are making images out of artificial intelligence. You write something and it makes that image. And the recent one is these things that rhyme with like elf on a shelf, like you might have a trike on a bike or something like this. Anyway, elf on a shelf is fed up with everyone copying him. Better get up on my shelf. He landed on his knife when he jumped from the mantel shelf. Tired of ridicule, elf on a shelf decided to kill himself. The end. Well, Ashley, would you like to come on up?
This gentleman like...
Yeah, well, actually, yeah. So, remind me your name again.
Yeah, Pater Mace.
Pater Mace, come on up. Now you can move this, adjust this, pick up the microphone if you want it. Welcome.
What are you going to do? I might do a wee political poem, seeing that seems to be the...
Yeah.
Most political poems tend to die out when the politicians they're written about leave the scene. There's some poems so good that they deserve to outlive the politicians they were written about. And this poem was written by a great mate of mine, Mr. John Dengate. And it's called If I'd Have Been Tony Blair's Mother. You can sit there and let me start again. You can sit there and look patronising. You can sneer with your upper lip curled. But if I'd have been Tony Blair's mother, we'd live in a much safer world. I'd have carefully monitored friendships that my little Tony might forge. I'd have warned him, keep out of bad company, and I don't want you playing with George. Like his father, he's far too aggressive. He'll just get you into a fight. And Tony, I know he can't help it, but George is not very bright. So Tony, take heed of your mother. I warn you, you're risking a smack. If you don't take to heart what I'm saying, wash your face and stay out of Iraq. It's not a suitable playground. No matter what Georgie might say, he's just a dumb little bully with whom you're forbidden to play. Now Tony might turn on a tantrum, the way lots of naughty boys do. I want to play soldier with Georgie. Don't have to listen to you. But I'd have been firm and insistent. A good mother doesn't give in. I'd have known for the sake of the planet that this was a fight I must win. If I'd have been Tony Blair's mother, Tony would not be so glib. He'd be just a little more thoughtful and less prone to fudge and to fib. He'd be less inclined to go soldiering, to Tony, to power and wealth. He'd stay home and fix up the railways, the schools and the national health. He'd have learned a bit more about Bevan and old Labor leaders before. And he wouldn't be mixing with George Bush. And he wouldn't be going to war. Mr. John Dengate. I reckon if you were a bushranger in Australia and nobody wrote a poem about you, you can't be very good. Because there's so many poems written about bushrangers. And here's one written by one of our great poets, Mr. Will Ogilvie, called The Death of Ben Hall. Ben Hall's out in the Lachlan side with £1,000 on his head. A score of troopers were scattered wide, and 100 more were ready to ride wherever a rumour led. They'd followed his tracks from the Weddon Heights and north by the Wheelon Yards. Through dazzling days and moonlit nights, they sought him over their rifle sights with their hands on their trigger guards. The outlaws stole like a hunted fox through the scrub and stunted heath, and peered like a hawk from his eerie rocks through the waving boughs of the sapling box on the troopers riding beneath. His clothes were rent by the clutching thorn, and his blistered feet were bare, ragged and torn with his beard unshorn. He hid in the woods like a beast forlorn, with a padded path to his lair. But every night, when the white stars rose, he crossed by the gunning plain to a stockman's hut where the gunning flows, and struck on the door 3 swift, light blows, and a hand unhooked the chain. The outlaw followed the lone path back with food for another day. The kindly darkness covered his track. The shadows swallowed him deep and black as the starlight melted away. But his friend had read of the big reward, and his soul was stirred with greed. He fastened his door and window board, saddled his horse and crossed the ford, and spurred to the town at speed. You may ride at a man's or a maid's behest, when honour or true love call, and steel your heart to the worst or best, but the ride that is taken on a traitor's quest is the bitterest ride of all. A hot wind blew from the Lachlan bank, and a curse on his shoulder came. The pine trees frowned at him rank on rank. The sun on a gathering storm cloud sank and flushed his cheek with shame. He reigned at the court, and the tale began, that the rifles alone should end. Sergeant and trooper laid their plan to draw their net on a hunted man at the treacherous word of a friend. False was the hand that raised the chain, and false was the whispered word. The troopers have turned to the south again. You may dare to camp on the gunning plain. And the weary outlaw heard. He walked from the hut but a quarter mile, where a clump of saplings stood in a sea of grass like a lonely isle, and the moon came up in a little while like silver steeped in blood. Ben Hall lay down by the dew-wet ground, by the side of his tiny fire. A night breeze woke and he heard no sound as the troopers drew their cordon round, and the traitor earned his hire. And nothing they saw in the dim grey light but the little glow in the trees. They crouched in the tall cold grass all night, each one ready to shoot at sight with his rifle cocked on his knees. The rifle cocked on his knees. Then broke and the dawn whistle sung over the mountain wall. A little breeze blew over the ford. A sergeant sprang to his feet and roared, "In the name of the Queen, Ben Hall!" Haggard, the outlaw leapt from his bed, with his lean arms held on high. "Fire!" And the word was barely said, when the rangers rang to a shout of lead, and the dawn went drifting by. They kept their word, and they paid his pay, where a clean man's hand won't shrink, and that was a trader's master day, as he stopped by the bar on his homeward way, and he called on the crowd to drink. He banned no creed, and he barred no class, and he called to his friends by name, but the worst would shake his head and pass, and none would drink from the blood-stained glass, or the goblet red with shame. And I know when I hear the last grim call, and my mortal hour is spent, for the light is hid and the curtains fall, I would rather sleep with the dead Ben Hall than go where that traitor went. Mr. Will Ogilvie, that? Thank you.
Did Bill Ogilvie write that?
Yeah. Will Ogilvie wrote that. One of many great poems he wrote.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter. If you've got a few more, you'd be welcome to come on up after Ashley at the end, towards the end as well. I'll have to think of a limerick. Let's see. There once was a man named Pater Mace who did his poetry all around the place. Occasionally forgot, but more often he did not. And there's another line for that, which I haven't got in place. Yeah, oh well, yeah, that sort of works. But anyway, yeah, can I get your tea and coffee when Ashley gets up here, either of you?
We might, is there somewhere grab something to eat around here?
Well, I usually do dinner before.
Yeah, no, we're going to grab something, that's all.
Yeah.
We're good.
All right, where am I at the moment? Oh yeah. This one is Thundercloud Quotes and Rhetoric, written 9 hours ago this morning. Lack of discipline may be the reason, but it's never an excuse. Those who abuse others usually engage in self-abuse. Do not shoot the messenger, but this is what I'm seeing. Those who abuse themselves usually abuse other beings. And I didn't really write much this week, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite Ashley Albanese up here, and come on up, Ashley. Now, Peter, now tell me about that t-shirt. That's not Louisa Lawson, is it?
No. Yes, it is.
It is. I thought so. I thought I recognised an old friend. She's actually an awesome poet. Her rhyme and metre was just impeccable, and her use of the language, I think, was actually...
Isn't it Henry Handel Richardson?
Sorry?
Isn't it Henry Handel Richardson? Oh no, it's Lawson's mother.
Well,
I didn't know they'd
Henry
done
Lawson's
that.
mother.
Is that from a stand? Similar, isn't it? Well, here we are again, as a great military engineer regularly says to hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And I have my trusty trio, but they make up one measure tonight. What have I been reading and thinking about? Well, I notice in the upheavals in Western Asia that the endless bloggers and commentators I read are always recommending that we go back to Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Oh, sorry, my memory's going. Heart of Darkness. And to any auditors listening, I would recommend, speaking from our settler colony of Australia tonight, Herman Melville's extraordinary piece of writing, Benito Sereno, which trumps all texts, I think, dealing with colonialism and the wars of endless aggression for resources that make it problematic for all of us. Starts off with the words, in the year 1799, Captain Amasa Delano of Duxbury in Massachusetts, commanding a large sealer and general trader, lay at anchor with a valuable cargo in the harbour of Santa Maria, a small, desert, uninhabited island toward the southern extremity of the long coast of Chile. There he had touched for water. Well, we had the 19th century slaughtering and running our boats to control hydrocarbons, COAL to control coal, and now we run our boats to control hydrocarbons, but it's a shorter word that's spelled G-O-D. Oh no, sorry, I'm having a bad night. A shorter word spelled O-I-L. It seems that oil is a problem for all of us. Anyway, I recommend Benito Sereno. It's an extraordinary piece of writing by the unique, passionate, searing voice of Herman Melville. Yes, I thought about the new Napoleon film when he threw the pellet from the horse's body to the Batman next to him and said, "For Mother." It's a rather sombre moment, and the whole film rather becomes a forest from that seed and trunk. It has some redeeming qualities, that film, about General Bonaparte. I've been surprised at the lack of intellectual depth to any commentary on it that I've read so far. But be that as it may, I would recommend it. I loathed it, I hated it, but I went twice and I was really entertained by my disgust. Only the Anglos could make a film about a revolutionary warrior who changed the whole world quite like they did. Be that as it may, I will finish with a poem from last week and a piece that Nettie Palmer wrote on the edge of the First World War, and an Arabic poem in English. I wrote this in the garden where I spent my afternoon today, as I did then last week. Buzzing, buzzing by the bees were there, choosing here, why there, to garner up the pollen's flow. I know, the flower, the choreographed, cupping petaled shower, point to point, kiss to kiss, makes the flower we flower just so that flowers within. And I read this afternoon, and it is considerable. She was quite a character, Nettie Palmer. Week after week I always recommend that all Australians should read her journal 14 years, which goes from the First War, or nigh, through to the coming of the horrors of 1939 and 40. And no matter how many times I read it, it moves me as a unique mirroring of Australasian things. So I'll read a poem she wrote called Brittany, which was the site of counter-revolution actually against the revolution and General Bonaparte. And you do need to realise that the sacristan figure at the end is the person who looks after the horizon line, or the altar where the body and blood of Christ is raised as the bells of the Mass ring. You do have to realise that she's confronting herself as well as the sacristan, who does those chores, has to look after the broader community of a church, both physically and metaphysically. So I'll read her poem, Brittany, and then I will finish with something germane. So, Brittany. The crops were yellowing that July, in light that could not waver or fail, in winds that guided the blood-red sail of homing boats by a sunset sky. And that was the month of pardons there. In village and village roundabout, the sacred emblems were carried out for Sunday processions in dreamy air, and the tides that month ran blue and high. They lapped the stones of the low church wall, and softly bit where the rush's tail had diked a garden in years gone by. I sketched one day by a banked up field. The tide came in, full, soft and blue, and shone beside me. I gazed and drew, and fought with colours that would not yield. There stood a cottage beyond the wheat, a heap of stones well piled, no more. It watched the boats as they neared the shore. The grass about it was long and sweet. A peasant woman had passed and said, "In yonder cottage a sick man lies. I think by the one black rook that flies, before tomorrow he lies there dead." I painted on, for the lights elude, and life's too short to entrap that glow, that splendour of summer, that overflow of beauty there in its matchless mood. And then, as an old wife hobbled near and said, "In that house my son has died. His child has gone for the grave cloth wide, and cross and candles to guide his bier." Why then, by the westering sun I saw, and then by her old sad eyes I knew, as the water shone there wide and blue, she felt but heaven, no break, no flaw. She went. I stayed on the narrow ledge between the field and the radiant tide, and old tunes arose in the air to glide across the waters that lap the sedge. I turned my eyes from the dazzling west. A man came out from the village street, and pacing with steady, solemn feet, he carried a cross before his breast. The cross of the church, to stand all night by him who had died that day of days. It flashed and gleamed in the level rays, and the man who bore it was close in sight. He trod the dyke and our glances met. Now he was a man and I was a man, but I made way for the sacristan, for God's in Brittany, living yet. As I read that, I thought of Walt Whitman for some reason, crossing Brooklyn Ferry in New York in the sunset, or the morning light at night. It's an underrated piece, I think. And I will finish with something by Professor Refat al-Arir, who was slaughtered with his sister and her four children the other day in Gaza, literally slaughtered and hunted down and bombed to death. deliberately targeted by those who relive and live again history. Anyway, it's a simple piece. If I Must Die by Professor Rafat Al-Ariyar. If I must die, you must live, to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite. My kite you made, flying up above, and think for a moment an angel there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale. One of the last things he was to write.
Oh, can we do one more? I've got to go.
Okay.
Do one more before I go?
Sure. Thank you.
Oh, I would like just to say one more thing. It relates to your poem about Blair, and relates to you in some way, I think. Many years ago, I was in the art gallery in Sydney. I think it was the first major, no, it may have been the second major Iraq War. And I was talking to a Scotsman, and he turned around and he said to me, and I'm sure he had a wide range of contact. This certainly relates to Blair. And he said to me, I have not met one man or woman in Scotland who supports these resource wars the Americans are raging. And then he looked at me and he said, you know, none of the countries around Iraq support the American Allied actions either.
Interesting. Here's a poem I wrote after being billeted by a local historian at Dorrigo. I was performing at the Dorrigo Folk Festival, and I was billeted by a local historian. He told me the story, and I went home and wrote this poem, which I called Oppression. And I've been driving for 6 or 7 hours, and I've had 2 glasses of wine, so if I stumble, that's my excuse. In a court in the county Roscommon, Doolan stood as the sentence was read. Charged with 3 counts of sheep stealing, he stood with his heart filled with dread. With his sister, grandfather and neighbour, they would all feel the wrath of the court. Transportation for life boomed his honour, a high price for attempts to support a family faced with starvation in this land now controlled from afar, the masses oppressed and downtrodden by the landlords controlling the bar. Doolan's mind reminisced of his childhood, days spent on the Shannon's cool banks as the salmon ran up for the spawning, mass on Sunday, as locals gave thanks. Thanks for what? Doolan thought to himself. A life eat from no more than a plot, rent paid to an absentee landlord, be English or Irish or Scot. Doolan's mind snapped back to the present. The judge solemnly said, as a favour, the grandfather's sentence commuted to a year at home with hard labour. On that freezing day in November, a last look at Ireland's fair shore, then entombed in a prison ship's hold with the rest of the wretched and poor, transported in chains on the Diamond, 16 weeks sailing to the unknown, where death was a constant companion, survivors measure skin and bone. Cast ashore in Sydney, then marched to the barricaded Castle Hill, 6 days spent on the road gangs, the 7th receiving God's will. Sentence served, a parole was then granted. Doolan wed, and with wife then set forth to the mountainous New England region to farm those wild hills to the north, cleared the land to run sheep and cattle as the cedar trees fell to the axe, but his stock were predated upon by those wily stock stealers, the blacks. They were cunning and knew the land well. Doolan tried with both rifle and fire to rid the run of this menace. No law way out here to inquire. The full truth will never be known. Rumours talk of strychnine in the flour that was fed to the gins and the children. The results were horrendous and dour. For when Doolan returned to the homestead with supplies, a new stable to build, a shocking sight there to confront him. Wife and children, save one, had been killed. 'Twas unheard of, the tribe killing children. What had triggered this horrendous crime? The rumours now seemed to have substance, the truth lost with the passage of time. Retribution was swift by the settlers. The tribe, rounded up in the wild, 200 forced over the cliff face, massacred man, woman and child. These settlers from poor Irish backgrounds, persecuted by England's cruel hand, seem to lose all regard for compassion as they carve up the tribe's sacred land. Maybe it's just human nature, the die in which we're all cast. The oppressed becomes the oppressor, so easy forgetting the past. This massacre was just one of many. Okay, conditions for settlers were tough, but in light of the wholesale slaughter, saying sorry seems hardly enough. Thank you.
I'm going to go and grab a what to eat.
Well, thanks very much, Peter. Yeah. Are you going to be around tomorrow?
I'm here the next couple of days, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm open at 9 o'clock, so open all day. Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Great job. Okay then.
So,
Thank you.
catch you tomorrow, yeah.
Thanks for the poem.
Okay, no problem. Good night.
Right. Moving forward in Henry Lawson's life now. Old tunes. When friends are listening round me, Jack, to hear my dying breath, and I am lying in a sleep, they say will end in death. Don't notice what the doctor says and let the nurse complain. I'll tell you how to rouse me if I'll ever wake again. Just you bring your fiddle, Jack, and set your heart in tune and strike up Annie Laurie or the rising of the moon. And if you see no token of a rising in my throat, you'll need to brace your mouth, old man. I'm booked by Charon's boat. And if you are not satisfied, then I am off the scene. Strike up the Marseillaise or else the wearing of the green. And should my fingers tremble not, then I have crossed the line. But keep your fingers steady, Jack, and strike up Old Lang Syne. It's an old Henry Lawson little quick one. And I really haven't written that much this week. So I've got one more for you here out of this book. And here we go. I'm just going to pull up a random poem for you. One that I haven't even read yet, so don't be surprised if I stumble. Oh well, this one I'll probably have. The slip rails and the spur. The colours of the setting sun withdrew across the western land. He raised the slip rails one by one and shot them home with trembling hand. Her brown hands clung, her face grew pale, quivering chin and eyes that brim. One quick fierce kiss across the rail and goodbye Mary, goodbye Jim. Oh, he rides hard to race the pain, who rides from love, who rides from home, but he rides slowly home again, whose heart has learnt to love and roam. A hand upon a horse's mane, and one foot in the stirrup set, and stooping back to kiss again with, goodbye Mary, don't you fret. When I come back, he laughed for her. We do not know how soon 'twill be. I'll whistle as I round the spur. You'll let the slip rails down for me. She gasped for sudden loss of hope, as with a backwards wave to her he cantered down the grassy slope and swiftly round the darkening spur. Black pencilled panels standing high, and darkness fading into stars and blurring fast against the sky, faint white form beside the bars. And often, at the set of sun, in winter bleak and summer brown, she'd steal across the little run and shyly let the slip rails down. And listen there when darkness shut the nearest spur in silence deep, and when they called her from the hut, steal home and cry herself to sleep. A great white gate where slip rails were, a brick house neath the mountain brow, the mad girl buried by the spur, so long ago forgotten now. And he who rides hard to dull the pain, who rides from one that loves him best, and he rides slowly back again, whose restless heart must rove for rest. That's from In the Days When the World Was Wide. All right, well, that's it for Wednesday Words tonight. Nice and quick, nice and easy, but still decent. Thank you very much for joining us out there in the YouTube world. If you've liked this, make sure you've given it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Send it to your friends. Put the link into a message and send it to your good friend in a message. Excellent. Don't forget, in the description, there is the donation link at Australian Poetry Hall in PayPal. Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening. We'll see you next week for Wednesday Words here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. See you later.